Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Blagg family. Jennifer Blagg was born on January 8, 1967, in Oklahoma, USA. She grew up with her mother and one brother, and they were very close from a young age. Jennifer was creative, sociable, and enjoyed playing the piano and dancing. However, she faced a traumatic experience in childhood when, at the age of 12, she was raped by a family friend who was much older than her. This incident deeply affected her, and it took a long time for her to heal. Despite this, she eventually overcame her feelings of resentment, pain, and anger, graduated from high school, and went on to attend college. Her future husband, Michael, was born into a military family. They frequently moved due to his father's career as a colonel in the U.S. Air Force. Growing up in such an environment was challenging, but Michael was a calm and obedient child. Michael was hardworking and intelligent. He even participated in a program sponsored by the governor to study nuclear physics, for which he received an honorary diploma. He continued to pursue his studies in science thereafter. Michael achieved everything by his own labor, because nothing in life came to him easily. He later shared that during this time, he worked as a pizza delivery driver to cover his college expenses. At 21, he married his first wife, but after about a year of constant issues in their relationship, they decided to get a divorce. In 2008, Jennifer enrolled at San Diego State University to pursue a business degree. Meanwhile, Michael chose to follow his father's path and joined the Navy, where he became a decorated Gulf War veteran and helicopter pilot. After returning from a business trip, he had some free time to explore the city. He attended a party with mutual friends, where he met Jennifer. They feel an attraction to each other, and Michael asked her out on a date, which she accepted. They went to the movies and afterward decided to start dating. In 1991, Michael and Jennifer got married and moved to the quiet town of Simpsonville in Southern California. They enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere and made many friends through their church. As a deeply religious couple, they seemed well prepared to start a family, even though Michael was often away serving in the Navy. 4 years later, they welcomed a daughter named Abby. After her birth, Michael left the military and secured a high-paying engineering job with a flexible schedule, allowing him to spend more time with his family. In his spare time, Michael began teaching Sunday school, which he considered important. However, due to Michael's job, they had to move several times, which was challenging for Jennifer. She often felt like just as she was settling into a new city and making new friends, her family had to move again. Despite her struggles, but when Michael proposed moving, Jennifer easily accepted because of her religious beliefs. Their final move occurred in 2001, when they decided to settle in Grand Junction, Colorado. It was a small, cozy town known as a winter resort, surrounded by mountains that attracted wealthy tourists. In Grand Junction, Michael took on an important role as an engineer for a company in that city. He also began teaching at the local Sunday school affiliated with the church. The family was very religious, and friends mentioned that they prayed about nearly every decision they made together. By 2001, Abby was 6 years old. She was getting ready for school and attended preparatory courses at a Christian school, where her mother, Jennifer, worked as a teacher's assistant. Abby was kind and helpful, assisting her parents with various household chores. She is also very religious, like her father and mother. On November 1, 2001, Michael called 911. The police were called and, upon arrival, they met Michael. According to Michael, he had just returned home from work and was immediately concerned when he saw the open door, because his family is always closed. As he entered the house, he didn't see anyone inside. In the bedroom, he discovered blood on bed, which dripped onto the floor. He also noticed that his wife's jewelry box was empty and that her handbag was on the floor, scattered with other belongings. Despite searching the entire house, he could not find his wife or daughter. Michael believed they were still alive and thought they might have been kidnapped, so he called for help. Based on the large amount of blood found, the police suspected that it was unlikely Jennifer and Abby were alive. They feared both may have been murdered. Since the Colorado River was nearby, the authorities considered the possibility that the bodies could have been disposed of in the river. They thoroughly searched the area, but found no signs of Jennifer and Abby. As the search operation expanded, volunteers and search teams joined forces to scour the surrounding region for any evidence related to Jennifer and Abby. Additionally, relatives of Jennifer traveled to the city to help with the search. While the search was ongoing, forensic experts examined the Blagg family home and collected various documents for analysis. They discovered significant amounts of blood on the bed and several fingerprints, which were sent to the lab for testing. Detectives also interviewed neighbors to piece together the timeline of incident from that day, but the neighbors did not see Jennifer and Abby. Michael was at work during the attack, a fact supported by CCTV footage and his colleagues' testimonies. He stated that he saw Jennifer and Abby alive early that morning, indicating that the attack likely occurred before he returned home from work. However, Michael was not excluded from the suspect list, as close family members are often scrutinized in such cases. However, it was crucial to verify the details carefully. The police interviewed Michael at the station, where he provided a thorough account of the incident from the previous day. He mentioned that around 7 p.m., Jennifer received a call from a friend who invited her to meet the following evening. After that, they watched TV and prepared for bed. By around 10 p.m., the entire family had gone to their rooms. Michael noted that early in the morning, when he woke up for work, Jennifer and Abby were still asleep. They were scheduled to get up around 6:30 to allow him to take Abby to her preparatory classes at school. After that, Jennifer returned home to take care of her daily tasks. Her husband Michael usually called her several times a day, but on that day, she didn't answer his calls. Assuming she might be busy, Michael didn't immediately worry. He then called her friend, assuming they decided to meet during the day, but the friend didn't know her whereabouts. Michael then continued with his day. He assumed she was at home, doing the laundry, cleaning, and cooking dinner. As soon as Michael returned home from work, he sensed that something was terribly wrong. There are two things that make him feel unusual. His daughter, Abby, didn't greet him as she usually did, and there was no smell of dinner cooking, which was unexpected since his wife Jennifer had planned to cook before meeting her friend. The scene became even more ominous when he spotted blood and immediately dialed the police. To preserve the crime scene, Michael went outside and waited for the police to arrive. The detectives then took over the investigation, and their inquiries led them to Abby's school. They discovered that she hadn't attended classes that day, which didn't surprise her teachers. Apparently, someone had called the class teacher the day before, claiming to be Abby's father and informing the school that she would be absent. The teacher wasn't suspicious at the time, but they did recall that a man, claiming to be Michael, had made the call. However, when questioned, Michael denied making the call, which only increased the suspicions about him. Further investigations revealed that Jennifer's friend from church, Melson, had noticed trouble in the Blagg family's relationship. Melson reported that Jennifer appeared to be extremely afraid of Michael. Jennifer only felt comfortable meeting in secret when Michael was not around. Jennifer had likely been forbidden by Michael from having visitors at their home. On one occasion, when Melson visited their house at length, Jennifer became anxious and hastily asked her to leave, probably to avoid Michael finding out that her had been to their house. The day before Jennifer's disappearance, Melson contacted Jennifer to invite her and Abby to visit. Notably, she specified that Michael, her husband, would not accompany them, which was unusual since the family typically traveled together. Melson agreed but thought the arrangement was peculiar. It was clear that Jennifer had recently argued with Michael and wanted space from him. Despite the plans, Jennifer never showed up the following morning. Later, investigators discovered voice messages from Michael to Jennifer, in which he sent her well wishes and affectionate greetings. However, authorities suspect that these messages may have been part of a setup, as it's possible that both Jennifer and Abby were already dead when the messages were sent. This thing raised suspicion about Michael's involvement, but he insisted on his innocence. He even gave interviews to journalists, expressing frustration that the police were focusing on him, and even they overlooking other suspects. Michael said he was deeply concerned about his wife and daughter's whereabouts and felt the real perpetrator was still at large. He has offered a $3,000 reward for any information that could help speed up the investigation. The detectives remained suspicious of Michael's behavior, so they decided to monitor him closely. During their investigation, they discovered blood on the bed, but strangely, very little was found on the surrounding walls. Normally, blood splatters and scatters in various directions, but in this case, that wasn't the case. DNA analysis revealed that the blood on the bed belonged to Jennifer. Additionally, when the detectives applied luminol to the family van, they found several hidden blood stains on the door and inside the vehicle, suggesting that it had been used to transport the victims, Abby and Jennifer. Michael reported to work on the day his wife and daughter disappeared. An investigation of the house revealed 55 fingerprints, many of which belonged to Michael. Notably, 17 fingerprints were unidentified, and 6 of those were small to potentially belong to young daughter, Abby. Despite this, Michael claimed that he had seen nothing unusual and pointed out that it was normal for family members' fingerprints to be present in the home. As the investigation continued, Michael relocated to a different house and didn't return to the original one, even after restrictions were lifted. He chose not to clean and no return to the house, stating that it was too painful for him. However, this decision ultimately worked in the police's favor as they were able to periodically examine the crime scene. In interviews with journalists, Michael portrayed the disappearance as resembling a robbery, citing the missing jewelry and money from the house. He also mentioned that there had been a string of burglaries in the area over the past year, suggesting that his family had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to Michael, the thieves may have broken in while his family was asleep, inadvertently targeting them. He suspected that the robbers were provoked by something when they entered his house. Even so, he held on to the hope that his wife and daughter were still alive. He often referenced Bible verses when communicating with the media, maintaining his innocence when questioned by the media and the police. However, detectives were convinced that the incident was not a robbery, as they found no signs of forced entry. They believed that the stolen items in the house were just a setup to distract the investigation. The police noted that robbers typically target empty homes to avoid confrontations and complications. If they encountered occupants, they wouldn't waste time and energy brutally killing them. Instead, they would opt for a quicker method. In the Blagg family home, a diary belonging to Jennifer was discovered. In it, she wrote about having a severe argument with Michael the day before her disappearance and fearing that he might harm her. Although she didn't elaborate on the details, she framed the situation in biblical terms. The detectives were unclear about the argument and approached Michael for clarification, but he maintained he had no memory of it. However, the police discovered a note addressed to him, apologizing for allowing negativity to creep back into their lives, suggesting relationship problems. When examining the Blagg family computer, the police were surprised to find thousands of hardcore pornography images. However, Michael denied any involvement in the images, he claiming that his wife was trying to spice up their lives. A further investigation showed that Michael and Jennifer's relationship had been troubled for a while. Michael had initially hired an escort out of curiosity, but over time he became hooked on the services. When investigators visited Michael's new house to question him, but no one opened the door, despite his car being parked outside. After hearing the sound of running water, they broke down the door and found Michael in the bathtub with cuts on his wrists that he had done to himself. In his hand, he was holding a photo of Abby and Jennifer, a Bible, and a note claiming he was not involved in their murders. Michael was rushed to the hospital, where he received medical treatment and survived. During the investigation, the sheriff's department received an anonymous tip about Michael's van being spotted near Ridge Park on the day Abby and Jennifer disappeared. This location was only a minute from them home. As a result, the police resumed their search, focusing on a 60 kilometers radius around them home. The new search lasted for 11 days, but failed to yield any results in the specified area. Subsequently, the police obtained new information. Michael was suspected of stealing an industrial item worth about $500 from his workplace shortly before Abby and Jennifer disappeared. Detectives called Michael in for questioning, suspecting he might be involved in the workplace incident. Michael broke down in tears, fearing he would be falsely accused of his family's murder, but he did not confess to the crime. Later, he explained that his emotional reaction was triggered by the fear of being wrongly accused of killing his family. A colleague of Michael contacted the police and provided crucial information. On the day Jennifer disappeared, Michael took out the trash at work, which was unusual since it was not part of his job. According to the colleague, they normally took turns doing this task. However, on that particular day, Michael insisted on doing it himself. He reacted aggressively when his colleague offered to help. It now seemed clear that Michael was trying to dispose of evidence. On June 5, 2002, the police discovered a woman's body that matched Jennifer's description. The body was wrapped in some type of cover and had holes in it, with a bullet still lodged in her head. It appeared that the killer had discarded her body in a landfill. Forensic experts confirmed through dental records that the murdered woman was indeed Jennifer. They determined that she died from a close-range gunshot wound to the head. Additionally, they also was established that she was killed while sleeping, as a retainer was found in her mouth, which she only wore at night. Unfortunately, the body had lain in the open for 7 months, and as a result, the remains were severely decomposed, providing limited information for the investigators. Investigators found that there were several garbage sites assigned to different companies. After digging at the location where the Jennifer's body was found, they confirmed that this particular area was managed by the company where Michael worked. The police, considering this coincidence to be more than accidental, they intensified their search for Abby's body at the dump but were unsuccessful. Further investigation revealed that Michael had left the city without warning, relocating to a different state. Although Abby's body was not found at the dump, the evidence was sufficient to charge Michael with the murder of Abby and Jennifer. The relatives of Jennifer were deeply upset by the manner in which her body was treated, and they strongly suspected Michael of disposing of Abby's bodies in a similar way. The detectives were unable to find anyone who knew the suspect Michael well enough to approach. However, they then discovered that his mother was still alive. Since she lived in Georgia, a state he often visited, the detectives decided to pay her a visit. Upon arriving at her house, they were met by a man. He was identified as Michael, who was subsequently arrested and transported back to Colorado to face charges of double first-degree murder. Following Michael's capture, the search teams decided to re-examine the landfill area. They regrouped and brought in volunteers to aid in the search. Over the course of 7 weeks, they searched through 7,000 tons of trash, but unfortunately, they never found Abby's body. The prosecutor's office suspected that Michael was living a double life. On the surface, the family appeared perfect, but in reality, Michael was manipulative and cruel. However, his first wife did not support these claims, stating that she had never experienced insults or physical abuse from him. In contrast, several witnesses reported that Michael's relationship with Jennifer was troubled from the start, with frequent arguments even before they got married. Michael and Jennifer's issues stemmed from Michael's love for partying and spending time with friends, while Jennifer wanted to build a strong family and asked him to stop going out. Eventually, Jennifer issued an ultimatum, and Michael chose to commit to her. They got married, and soon after, they had a child. During this time, Michael was still serving in the Navy, which often left Jennifer alone to cope with postpartum depression and care for their newborn daughter. Although she faced many difficulties, but Jennifer never complained. However, the relationship began to deteriorate due to domestic issues. After that, Michael found a job as an engineer, and things seemed to improve. He also started teaching at a Sunday school. However, his fellow teachers disagreed with his teaching methods and views on discussing topics like sex and abortion with teenagers. His liberal approach clashed with the conservative values of the Sunday school, leading to him having to quit his job there. Following this, the Blagg family traveled a bit more before settling in a new location to start fresh. This move resulted in big debt because their house in South Carolina took a long time to sell. Jennifer was initially unhappy in their new home and frequently called her friends, wishing to return. However, since Michael was earning a good income and managing to pay off their debts, she chose to stay with him during this challenging time. Before the violent incident occurred, there seemed to be a serious issue in the marriage. A local law firm employee reported that a few days before Jennifer's disappearance, she sought marriage and family counseling. Unfortunately, she was turned away because the lawyer was on vacation. Jennifer revealed that she had been a victim of Michael's violence and wanted to initiate a divorce. The firm intended to assist her as soon as they returned. But she vanished before they could meet again. Although police searched her house, car, and garage, they found no traces of her blood. However, it was suspected that Abby was likely murdered because she may have witnessed her mother's, Jennifer, murder. It was believed that she was probably strangled, which could explain why there were no blood traces found. The prosecutor's office decided to pause proceedings to gather information about the child Abby. Without a body, proving the murder would be extremely challenging. Michael was released on bail and allowed to stay with his mother within the city while awaiting the hearing. Michael claimed he could not have killed his family, stating he had no motive. He insisted that family relations were good and mentioned he had been preparing for Christmas by buying gifts worth over $5,000 for his loved ones. However, no one found his claims credible. The hearings were scheduled for March 2004. It was believed that Jennifer wanted to end her relationship with her husband, Michael, who did not agree and became angry. The prosecutor's office suspected that he killed both his wife and possibly their daughter during the night, then hid their bodies and went to work in the morning, trying to dispose of them with the trash. After his work shift, Michael returned home and called the police. Jennifer's mother testified for the prosecution. At first, she supported Michael, but her opinion changed when she saw the evidence. She claimed that Michael had been abusive to Jennifer for a long time, particularly when he was drinking. During those times, he would often attack and choke Jennifer, sometimes leaving her unconscious. After 12 hours of deliberation, the jury found Michael guilty of murdering Jennifer and sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on April 16, 2004. Although the trial concluded, but Michael's story did not end there. 10 years later, Michael had a chance to retry his case. Throughout the years, his lawyers searched for any possible ways to appeal. One major issue was that one of the jurors was blind, making it difficult for him to fully assess the evidence presented. Additionally, a female juror had intentionally provided false information on her questionnaire. She later confessed, explaining that her bias against Michael stemmed from her own experiences as a long-term victim of domestic violence. This affected her ability to objectively consider the details of the case, resulting in her vote against him. As a result, the verdict was overturned, and preparations for a new trial began. The lying juror was found guilty of contempt of court and received the 10-day prison sentence along with a $10,000 fine. In a surprising turn, the defense introduced a new suspect, a man named Philip Ruins, from Montana. He was linked to a series of brutal rapes, and both Jennifer and Abby were among his many victims. In November 2001, it was reported that he was in Colorado around the same time Abby and Jennifer went missing. Philip had a history of brutal crimes but had never faced punishment until now. In 201st, a new trial was held for him. This time, the prosecution called in an expert to analyze the crime scene. The expert suggested that the arrangement of objects in the house indicated a staged crime rather than a genuine robbery. He noted that the crime was executed clumsily and unprofessionally. According to his assessment, Jennifer was shot while she was asleep in her bed. The assailant then held her down until her heart stopped, after which he removed her body from the house and placed it in a van. Unfortunately, the expert could not provide any useful information about Abby due to a lack of evidence. Michael's family said he was heartbroken after his wife and daughter went missing. They all embraced and cried together, creating a deeply emotional scene. They found it hard to believe that he could be involved in his wife's murder. During the interrogation and trial, Michael remained quiet and composed, showing little emotion. The prosecutor interpreted his calm demeanor as a sign of guilt. However, Michael's lawyer argued that such behavior was typical for a conservative husband. Despite the lawyer's efforts, Michael was once again found guilty of murdering his wife and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, investigators were also looking into Philip. He was a convicted sexual predator serving 200 years for creating and distributing child pornography and for sexually abusing minors. Philip lured his young victims through his online forum. When police searched Philip's home, they discovered a list of victims' names that included Jennifer and Abby, with the date of the kidnapping coincides with the time of their disappearance. However, there is no physical evidence linking Philip to this crime, no fingerprints or DNA were found at the scene, and his handwriting did not match any evidence. Additionally, it is unclear how Jennifer's body ended up in the landfill, where trash from her husband's workplace was dumped. As a result, investigators did not believe Philip was involved in the murder of Jennifer or the disappearance of Abby. However, the trial against Philip Ruins for various charges was difficult. Many of his victims experienced significant mental health problems due to the violence they endured. Some faced substance addiction, while others suffered from persistent nightmares. Unfortunately, there has been little advancement in the investigation into Abby's disappearance, as Philip has not admitted to the murders of either Jennifer or Abby. Abby's body has still not been located, and her fate remains unknown. She could possibly still be alive. A portrait of Abby has been created, and debates are ongoing about whether Michael is truly guilty of his wife's murder or if he was wrongfully convicted. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez. Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez was born in the fall of 1990 in Oñan, the capital of Paraguay. She was the oldest of two daughters in a poor working-class family. When the girls were still young, their parents divorced. Their mother, Miriam Rodriguez, had to raise them alone. She worked multiple jobs because her ex-husband did not provide any financial support and showed no interest in their well-being. When Romina was still in school, she started working to support her mother and younger sister. At 17, she entered a romantic relationship with a boy named Christopher. He courted her sweetly, and they dreamed of a future together. However, their happiness ended when Romina discovered she was pregnant and told Christopher. He responded by giving her an ultimatum that she could either have an abortion or they would break up for good. Romina was deeply wounded by her lover's words, but after talking to her parents, who she had always been close to, she made the decision to keep the baby. Her greatest fear was that having an abortion at such a young age might prevent her from ever becoming a mother in the future. Therefore, she felt she had no other option. Christopher, true to his word, ended all communication with her and showed no interest in Romina or their child's well-being. At 18, Romina gave birth to a son named Lucas. The arrival of the baby only made their already difficult financial situation worse. Money was extremely tight, and now Romina had to support her grandson too. Feeling depressed about their circumstances, she wanted to improve things and help her family, but she struggled to find a well-paying job in Paraguay. She called her aunt, who lived in sunny Spain. Her aunt invited her to come stay, saying it would be easier for Romina to settle there and that Europe offered more opportunities than Latin America. Without thinking too much, Romina packed only the essentials and bought a plane ticket to Spain. She left her 2-year-old son in the care of her mother and sister, planning to bring him to her once she found a new home and a stable job. In late summer 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and then traveled to Alcobendas, a provincial town, where she stayed at her aunt's house. She quickly started searching for a job, and luck was on her side. She secured a position as an administrator at a hotel, earning a good salary. She sent some of her earnings back home and used the rest to rent her own apartment, so as not to impose on her generous relatives. Romina soon met a man named Javier, and they entered into a tumultuous relationship. Like her, Javier had immigrated to Europe seeking happiness and a better life. He was originally from El Salvador, worked in construction, and appeared to be a serious individual. However, when Romina became pregnant, Javier was once again unprepared for the responsibility of parenthood. Despite this, they attempted to live together for a time. Unfortunately, shortly after their son was born, they ultimately separated. Romina found herself in a challenging situation, stranded in a foreign country with a newborn and unsure of what to do next. For a time, she returned to her aunt's house, where she received support and assistance. When the boy was about 6 months old, Romina returned to work because she couldn't afford to stay home. A few months later, she faced another shock. She had been ignoring her poor health and weakness, thinking they were just due to stress and fatigue. However, when Romina finally visited the doctor, she received a cancer diagnosis. She underwent several rounds of chemotherapy, lost her hair, and lost a significant amount of weight, but ultimately triumphed over the disease. After her treatment, she quickly recovered, continued working, and used wigs to cover her hair loss. Romina believed that after enduring such difficult challenges, a period of happiness was on the horizon. She saved money and planned to take her eldest son, along with her mother and sister, on a trip to Spain. In the summer of 2017, Romina attended an event with friends where she met a man named Raul Diaz. He was attractive, impressive, had a stable job, and was financially secure. Raul was drawn to Romina's beauty and began asking mutual friends about her. Romina was equally interested in Raul, and when he invited her on a date, she happily accepted. Raul was nearly 15 years older than Romina and worked as a lead process engineer at a large energy company. He had been through 2 divorces and had 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships, but Romina was not bothered by the age gap. Similarly, she was also a single mother, raising sons from her own 2 past relationships. After just one date, they quickly realized they were in love and didn't want to be apart. Romina, filled with excitement, enthusiastically shared her happiness with friends. Her new partner showered her with small gifts and thoughtful surprises nearly every day, organized romantic outings, sent flowers with heartfelt messages, and offered her compliments. Romina felt she had finally found true love and a man who would accept her and her sons. However, she soon began to hear unsettling rumors about him. People claimed that he had been rude and even cruel to his former wives, which had led to the end of both his marriages. Despite this, Romina didn't want to believe the rumors, although she noticed that Raul had no contact with either his ex-wives or his daughters. Despite their significant age difference and the presence of children from previous relationships, the couple did not let these factors stand in their way. Just 6 months after they met, they chose to move in together in a luxurious villa on Lanzarote, one of the Canary Islands. To Romina, this place felt like paradise, but her happiness was short-lived. Raul, who initially seemed like the perfect partner, soon revealed a controlling side. At first, they lived with Romina's youngest son, and Raul made an effort to take care of the child. Romina even believed he would be a great father to her boys. Raul promised her a long and happy life together, assuring her that he would take care of her and the children. Romina, deeply in love, trusted his words and eagerly accepted his proposal to marry him. However, Raul insisted they needed time alone together to fully enjoy their relationship before the wedding. Raul not only wanted to take Romina's eldest child from Paraguay, but he also hoped to distance himself from her youngest son. Despite this, Romina trusted her partner and ignored warnings from her friends who noticed his odd behavior. In June 2018, Raul purchased tickets for Romina and her child to travel to Paraguay, along with a return ticket solely for Romina. When she returned home and shared details about her partner, her mother and sister became uneasy about Raul's intentions. They suspected he simply wanted to get rid of her children. Romina was hurt by their comments and ended up having a small argument with her family. A few days later, she flew back to Spain, promising to return for the boys in the fall. When Romina got back, she received a warm welcome, and for 2 months, she was happily alone with Raul. However, in August, just a few days before the wedding, Raul violently attacked Romina. This was a shocking experience for her, but he pleaded for her forgiveness on his knees, assuring her that it would never happen again, and she chose to believe him. Romina did not report the incident or tell anyone about it. On August 10th, she attended the wedding with makeup covering her bruises, unaware that the man she was marrying would soon take her life. 2 weeks after the wedding, the girl returned to Paraguay, not to pick up her sons as she had initially planned, but to visit her family. Her mother and sister were confused by the changes they noticed in her since they last saw each other. Romina appeared upset and disoriented. She walked with a noticeable limp and had bruises on her neck, which she tried to cover with a scarf. When asked about her condition, Romina either remained silent or claimed she had hurt herself accidentally. She stayed at home for nearly a month, which surprised her relatives since she had just gotten married. Romina explained that her husband had suggested she visit her children because she missed them. Miriam praised her son-in-law for being generous, but she still couldn't understand why her daughter seemed so unhappy. In mid-September, Romina secretly borrowed money from her relatives to buy a return ticket to Spain because her husband refused to pay for it. This should have been a clear sign that returning was not a good idea, yet Romina still hoped for a happy resolution to their marriage. On September 17th, at the airport, her mother, sister, and sons saw her for the last time. After returning to her husband, Romina's life began to feel like a nightmare. Raul, who was using illegal drugs, no longer hid his addiction from her. When under the influence, he became aggressive and emotionally abused Romina. Each time she tried to leave, he promised to change and insisted that it wouldn't happen again. After the beatings and threats, there were often brief periods when Romina's husband would become loving and caring again, showering her with gifts and planning romantic outings. However, these peaceful moments became shorter over time, and instances of violence occurred more frequently. Just before the new year, Romina confided in her best friend that she feared her husband and worried he might eventually kill her. On December 29th, Raul beat her so severely that she had to seek medical attention. The hospital staff noticed something was wrong and considered calling the police to report the incident. At that moment, Raul arrived and insisted that Romina had simply fallen and that there was no need to involve the authorities. Romina went along with his story, declined hospitalization, and returned home with him. On January 1, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, repeatedly tried to call her daughter, but Romina did not answer. Concerned, Miriam then called her son-in-law to check on Romina, but he also did not answer. After several days of no contact, Miriam sent Raul a message indicating she would go to the police for help. This prompted Raul to quickly return her call, explaining that he and Romina had a fight on December 31st, after which she left with her belongings. He reassured Miriam that Romina would be okay and would return home soon, as this had happened before. Miriam, however, doubted Raul's explanation and felt something was wrong with her daughter. She insisted that Raul report the situation to the police. Finally, on January 8, pressured by Romina's family, Raul reported her disappearance. This time, he altered his story slightly, claiming that after their quarrel, Romina had taken some money from him and suggested that she might have gone to Paraguay to see the children, which is why he was not too worried before he heard from Miriam. What was Raul hiding? His testimony was filled with confusion and contradictions, raising many questions and suspicions. As a result, law enforcement decided to investigate the couple's life. After speaking with friends and family, they discovered that the marriage was far from perfect. Romina had often complained to loved ones about her husband's abuse, though she never provided details. Others frequently noticed bruises and injuries on her body. The police decided to place Raul under covert surveillance, tapping his phone conversations. However, Raul seemed to sense that he was being monitored and acted very cautiously, avoiding any behavior that might raise suspicion. Despite this, the investigation continued, and it was soon revealed that Romina had visited the hospital on December 29 with signs of severe beating. Her husband almost forcibly took her from the hospital, preventing her from going to the police. A few months ago, Romina filed a report for domestic violence but retracted it the following day. A week later, Raul, having calmed down somewhat, made a phone call to a relative in the police and carelessly mentioned that his wife was no longer alive and that her body would never be found. This statement prompted police to arrest him as the primary suspect and interrogate him thoroughly. Raul claimed that on New Year's Eve, his wife had been drinking heavily and started to argue with him. She demanded that he bring their children to live with them. When he said he wasn't ready for that, she had a violent outburst, started fighting, and began throwing things at him. Raul stated that he left his house for a few hours until things calmed down. Upon returning, he discovered Romina in the bathtub, unresponsive. He suggested that she had suffocated due to excessive drinking but was worried he might be suspected of her death or accused of murder. To protect himself, Raul decided to erase all evidence and report her as missing. Everyone was shocked by his admission of how he disposed of her body. He claimed he burned Romina's body on a barbecue in the backyard. Living in a luxury complex with a spacious area, he thought the neighbors wouldn't notice what he was doing or smell the burning flesh. However, he underestimated the situation because the barbecue did not function like a crematorium, and her remains were not fully burned after several hours. He then removed the body from the fire, cut it into parts, and put the pieces into separate bags. A few days later, he rented a car to transport the dismembered body to a remote and desolate area of the island, where he discarded the bags into the sea from the cliffs. The police spent weeks searching the shoreline and surrounding areas based on Raul's statements about where he had thrown his wife's remains. Divers and many volunteers participated in the search for body fragments underwater, but none of their efforts produced any findings. Meanwhile, on January 16, Raul was officially charged with domestic violence and the murder of his wife. This development followed a detailed search of his home, which utilized specialized equipment and luminol. This search uncovered multiple traces of washed blood in different rooms. Investigators discovered that Raul had been ordering caustic soda online, a substance used for removing organic materials and paint. In one of the second-floor rooms, he had scrubbed a bloody stain on the floor so aggressively that he damaged it and then attempted to cover it up with paint. According to investigators, this is the room where Raul dismembered his wife's body. Additionally, a broken piece of Romina's fingernail was found on the floor, which had traces of blood and Raul's skin cells, suggesting that she may have been alive and fought back during the incident. Also in the bathroom, investigators discovered Romina's contact lens stuck to the wall, possibly from a strong impact to her face. Despite extensive searching, law enforcement could not find any other remains. Meanwhile, a tourist called to report a lung fragment he found on the beach. He was unsure if it was from a human or an animal, but knowing that authorities were looking for a body in the area, he reported his discovery. By the end of February, forensic analysis confirmed that the lung fragment belonged to Romina. Raul continued to claim his innocence despite the evidence and examination results. He maintained his original belief that the woman had drowned in a bathtub while heavily intoxicated, even though evidence suggested there had been a violent struggle. He also stated that he did not use any tools to dismember the body. Instead, he claimed to have tried to burn it completely on a barbecue, asserting that the remains fell apart due to the heat, and he then placed them in bags to dispose of. This account was false for several reasons. First, the body of the adult Romina could not have fit in the fixture in his yard. Second, bones cannot become so fragile from fire that they fall apart without tools. Additionally, separating the lung from the body would require opening the chest, which cannot be done with bare hands. The investigation could not determine exactly how Raul killed his wife, but the evidence of a struggle in their home suggested that he may have beaten her to death. It was clear that Raul dismembered her body in the same room where he later repainted the floor to hide the blood. Eventually, faced with overwhelming evidence, he admitted that he accidentally killed his wife during a fight, contradicting his earlier claim that he found her dead in the bathtub. Despite his claims that she was drunk and violent, the defendant was found guilty in June 2023. Romina's family felt the sentence was too lenient. He received a 12.5-year sentence for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for confirmed domestic violence, and 1 year for causing serious bodily harm to Romina in December 2018 when she was hospitalized. He also received several months for bodily abuse. In total, the combined punishment was less than 16 years in prison. Raul is currently serving his sentence while simultaneously trying to appeal the court's decision. The story of Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez serves as a poignant reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence and the complex struggles faced by individuals seeking a better life. Despite her resilience and efforts to overcome adversity, Romina became a victim of a controlling and abusive relationship, ultimately leading to her untimely demise. The court's lenient verdict against her perpetrator reflects the ongoing challenges in addressing domestic violence, leaving her family and loved ones grappling with their loss and advocating for justice. As we reflect on Romina's case, it is crucial to continue raising awareness about the importance of supporting victims and holding abusers accountable to prevent such tragedies in the future. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Valeria Vivano. Valeria Fern Vivano was born on May 29, 1996, in La Granja, a small commune near Santiago, Chile's capital. She was the youngest of 3 children in a modest family, with her parents Miguel and Jacqueline Vivano. She grew up with her older brother Michelangelo and sister Daniela. Her father worked for a transportation company, while her mother stayed at home to care for the children and create a warm family atmosphere. When Valeria started school, her parents decided to separate, which was a huge shock for her. Even though they continued to communicate after the divorce and her father is still very interested in his children's lives, including providing financial support, Valeria felt resentment towards him. They sometimes argued and went months without speaking, but they always managed to reconcile. Soon after the divorce, Miguel remarried, and Valeria gained 2 half-siblings. She maintained warm family relationships with them, as well as with her siblings, Daniela and Michelangelo. Jacqueline, on the other hand, never remarried. She focused on raising her children and later took care of her grandchildren. From a young age, Valeria showed a strong character, determination, and remarkable perseverance in everything she did. She excelled academically, participated in sports, and was always brave and fair, willing to help others, even when it put her at risk. She pursued a career in law enforcement because of her desire to help people in need and fight for justice. After finishing high school, Valeria enrolled in a police academy in Santiago, where she graduated with honors in 2016, becoming an investigator. At just 20 years old, she joined the Chilean police force. The following year, she started working in the bureau that investigates serious crimes in the capital. From the very beginning, Valeria demonstrated her commitment as a law enforcement officer and her passion for justice. She loved her job, carried out her responsibilities with care, and was always ready to respond to emergencies, even in the middle of the night. She would rush to crime scenes, pursue criminals, and sometimes had to provide emotional support to people who had lost loved ones. Her colleagues described Valeria as kind, cheerful, and friendly, while also recognizing her as a true professional and a dependable partner. Valeria served in the police force for nearly 5.5 years, during which she received numerous awards and recognition. She advanced in her career, gaining the respect of her colleagues and the admiration of her superiors. She also represented her department in Spain, spending about 2 weeks in Madrid on an official visit. She took great pride in being entrusted with such significant responsibilities. By 2020, she had been promoted to assistant inspector. In January 2020, Valeria welcomed a new member to her precinct, 21 years old Lionel Alejandro Contreras Canales, who had just graduated from the police academy. Valeria took on the role of his mentor as he started his first job. A few months later, they became partners and initially got along well. Lionel comes from a wealthy and powerful family, with an uncle who is a high-ranking official. Having grown up in comfort and always getting what he wanted, because of this, he became quite selfish and believed that everything should go his way. Valeria noticed her new colleague, Lionel, who repeatedly tried to get her attention and asked her out several times. Each time, she firmly rejected him. Valeria was serious about her job and believed that workplace romances were inappropriate. She viewed Lionel as immature, not because he was 3 years younger, but due to his childish behavior. Despite this, she hoped to help him grow up. In July 2020, Valeria and Lionel attempted to catch robbers who had stolen money from a store's cash register. The criminals remained at the scene and opened fire, leading to a shootout in which Lionel fatally shot both of them. While this situation could have been avoided, Lionel's response was considered appropriate for apprehending the suspects. Nonetheless, this incident put a strain on the relationship between Valeria and Lionel. Valeria's last birthday celebration was on May 29, 2021, when she turned 25. The event took place at her mother's house and was attended by many guests, including family, friends, and co-workers. However, Lionel was not invited. Valeria decided not to invite his, as he had recently tried to pursue her again, and she wanted to avoid any awkwardness. When Valeria attempted to discuss with him, he only reiterated his feelings for her, which she preferred to keep private from her colleagues. Despite the big turnout, presents, warm wishes, and heartfelt congratulations, Valeria appeared upset, even as she tried to smile. She had recently argued with her father and they hadn't spoken in days. Valeria had hoped her father would come to her birthday, but instead, he only sent a brief congratulatory message and didn't even call. Jacqueline, her mother, recognized her daughter's unhappiness and understood the cause of her sorrow. Frustrated with her ex-husband's behavior, she believed he would eventually reach out to Valeria and they would resolve their differences, as they had in the past. Tragically, Valeria and her father never had the opportunity to speak again. Just 2 weeks later, on June 13, 2021, Valeria lost her life while on duty. She was working the night shift, patrolling the streets and checking vehicles as part of a manhunt for a suspect in connection with a crime against a young woman that occurred yesterday on the outskirts of the capital. Authorities were on high alert for a white Kia, suspected to be driven by one of the criminals. The suspect likely had a weapon and may not have been alone in the vehicle. Valeria was in a patrol car with her partner, Lionel, and they were being driven by Deputy Commissioner Felipe Gilardo. They spotted the suspect's vehicle and decided to chase it without waiting for backup. The officers successfully blocked the suspect's escape. Lionel and Vivano got out of their car with their guns drawn, ordering the suspects to surrender and exit their vehicle with their hands raised. Suddenly, a single gunshot was heard, leaving everyone confused about who had fired and from where. Valeria, holding her side, collapsed onto the asphalt next to the police car. Reinforcements arrived at that moment, and Valeria's colleagues heard the gunshot and saw she was injured, but they didn't fully understand what had happened or who had shot her. Taking advantage of the chaos, the criminals quickly fled the scene while first aid was being given to the wounded officer. Despite the swift arrival of medics and the efforts of her colleagues to control the bleeding, Valeria could not be saved. She was rushed to the nearest hospital, where top specialists worked hard to save her life for several hours. Unfortunately, due to severe blood loss and damage to vital parts, she passed away on the operating table without regaining consciousness. When Valeria's family received the news, her parents, brothers, and sisters quickly went to the hospital. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived, had already passed away. Miguel was not only heartbroken but completely shattered, as he never had the chance to talk to and make amends with his dear daughter after their last small argument. He felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and was so distressed by the tragedy that he needed medical help to avoid a heart attack. Valeria was officially reported to have died while on duty during an operation aimed at capturing dangerous criminals. She was celebrated as a hero who sacrificed her life for the safety and well-being of others. Local media extensively covered the incident, with reporters highlighting her bravery and selflessness. The investigation into her death was conducted by experts from the Homicide and Major Crimes Division, where Valeria had previously served. They determined that she died from a gunshot wound to the abdomen, inflicted by an assailant in the direction of the suspect's vehicle that she and her colleagues were chasing. The situation initially seemed straightforward, as witnesses supported the narrative, making it appear that the case had been resolved. The only task left was to locate and hold the offenders accountable, who were still at large and possibly fleeing. Shortly after, the suspects were caught, attracting significant public attention. The criminals were identified as 19-year-old Miguel Alejandro Capon and his 17-year-old accomplice, whose name was kept confidential due to his age. Both individuals had prior convictions for lesser crimes. The then president of Chile, Miguel Juan Sebastián Pinera, issued an official statement assuring the public that the perpetrators would face justice according to the law. However, something felt off. After the autopsy and necessary examinations, Valeria's body was returned to her family, who gave her a respectful burial in one of the city's cemeteries. Hundreds attended the funeral to pay their respects and offer condolences to her family. Jacqueline and Miguel described the entire experience as a nightmare. Among those who carried Valeria's coffin was her colleague Lionel, who seemed to grieve more than anyone else. However, other colleagues noted there had recently been some tension between them, to the point that Valeria hadn't invited Lionel to her birthday party. Shortly after the funeral, court proceedings began for the suspects who had been arrested the day after the incident and were currently in custody. Everyone believes that the person responsible for Valeria's death has been caught, and proving their guilt seems simple, especially when they begin to give confessions. However, it soon became apparent that the investigation had serious flaws from the beginning. Important details were missed, and crucial forensic evidence was minimized. The process was mismanaged, and higher officials tried to hide the identity of the actual person responsible for Valeria's death. About a month and a half after Valeria's death, the case took an unexpected turn. By the end of July, 2 employees were suspended for their alleged involvement in the incident that led to Valeria's death. On August 1st, the parents of Valeria were summoned to the prosecutor's office in the capital for an important meeting. They believed this meant that new evidence had come to light, and that the detainees would finally face the punishment they deserved. Miguel and Jacqueline were devastated to hear that Valeria was killed by a bullet fired by a colleague. Prosecutor Juan Carlos Carrasco personally announced the news, expressing condolences and apologizing on behalf of the entire investigation team. Valeria's parents were in shock. They couldn't grasp how it could have occurred. The fatal shot that killed Valeria was fired from a gun by one of her colleagues. A ballistics examination conducted that day confirmed this, but the results were inaccurately reported. The bullet taken from the body Valeria was incorrectly categorized with different characteristics, such as shape, caliber, and weight. Additionally, the bullet had passed through the body rather than being extracted from it. There was a mix-up in the forensic reports regarding the entry and exit wounds. The bullet did not enter through the abdomen and exit through the back as stated. In fact, the shot was fired at her back. Several pages from the autopsy report were missing, and others had been obviously tampered with. Furthermore, the detainees involved in the trial, who supposedly admitted their guilt and were about to be sentenced, began to file complaints. They alleged that their confessions were obtained through torture and intimidation, and that the firearm they had that night was not loaded. Valeria's story takes a sudden turn when she goes from a tragic hero who died on the job to a victim of betrayal, murdered by her own colleagues. In light of these new developments, the main suspects became Felipe Gilardo Era, the officer driving the police car, and Valeria's partner, Lionel Alejandro Contas Canales, who was in the back seat. Both were promptly suspended from their duties. On August 5th, it was revealed that the bullet that killed Valeria came from a service weapon. Later, an examination report showed that only Lionel had gunshot residue on his hands, making him the prime suspect. Interestingly, this information had not been disclosed earlier, as if it had been overlooked entirely. Several reports related to the ballistics examination and the pathologist's findings were mistakenly placed in an archive box, which was not properly reviewed. It remains unclear whether this was due to an accident, criminal negligence, or an intentional effort to hide important information. Now, the police officers involved in to capture the criminals that night are themselves regarded as suspects in the murder of Valeria. They, along with the previously arrested suspects, participated in a reenactment of the incident from that night. Felipe stated that from the driver's seat, he could only see Valeria, who was next to him in the front passenger seat and was the first to get out of the car. Lionel was sitting in the back and also exited, but the driver couldn't see his actions. Valeria had taken only a few steps when a shot rang out, she fell, and the suspect's car they were pursuing sped away. Lionel quickly ran to help Valeria. Lionel mentioned that he and Felipe exited the patrol car almost at the same time, but she had rushed forward as soon as the shot was fired. He firmly maintained that he did not shoot Valeria, and Felipe must witness and confirm this. He also confirmed that he was the first to reach Valeria and attempted to apply pressure to her wound. The testimonies from the witnesses varied, but the investigation revealed that Lionel was positioned behind Valeria at the time of the gunshot, and the bullet's path confirmed his location. Additionally, he was the only one with gunshot residue on his hands. New information from previously undisclosed reports and exam results led to potential motives for the crime. Lionel was arrested as the main suspect, while the previously detained young men were released with a non-exit agreement, since there were no charges against them. However, the reason for Lionel's actions is still uncertain. The primary theory was that the incident was a tragic accident. It is believed that Lionel, inexperienced officer, accidentally discharged his weapon while standing behind Valeria. In a state of panic, he tried to assist her, and when he returned his service weapon that day, he claimed he hadn't fired it. However, the truth soon emerged, and the young man's powerful relatives used their wealth and connections to try to cover up the incident. Because of that, the cleaned reports, missing documents, confusing evidence, and coerced testimonies from the detained individuals contributed. One theory, which Lionel himself partially confirmed, was that he was in love with Valeria and desperately wanted her attention. Unfortunately, his attempts only annoyed her, and she didn't even invite him to her birthday party, which the whole department attended. The shot in the back was his way of seeking revenge for this rejection. Another theory, suggested by Valeria's relatives, was that Valeria had uncovered something she shouldn't have, perhaps a corruption scheme or official misconduct. Being an honest and fair person, she would expose the culprit, leading to her being murdered to cover up the evidence. Young Lionel was chosen to carry out this act, with the promise that he would remain above suspicion. After Philippe was taken into custody, suspicions regarding Philippe remained. He was armed with the same type of service weapon, stood behind Valeria, and had the opportunity to fire the shot. Additionally, Philippe had a history of discipline for the unjustified use of a weapon during a criminal arrest, although no one was hurt in that incident. Because of this, he earned the nickname the Reckless Shooter. Lionel's defense team quickly adopted this theory, claiming that Philippe accidentally shot Valeria. Since both Philippe and Lionel carried identical service weapons, it was possible that the guns were mixed up or intentionally swapped. Additionally, Philippe was inconsistent in his testimony, changing it multiple times. He later said he couldn't accurately recall the incident of that night because everything happened so quickly. However, no gunpowder residue was found on his hands, suggesting he was innocent. In response, Lionel claimed that gunpowder got on his hands while he was applying pressure to Valeria's wound, and that Era, who also assisted she, might have washed his hands before the examination. This explanation was not credible, as Valeria's blood stains were still on Philippe's hands, and it is impossible to wash away gunpowder without also removing blood. The trial and verdict have raised concerns about the competence of the investigation team, leaving Valeria's parents feeling desperate in their quest for justice. The new developments in the case led to public outrage and diminished trust in law enforcement. This story garnered attention not just from Chilean media but also from international outlets. As a result, several high-ranking officials were suspended or lost their jobs, including the head of the Homicide Investigation Department. Following a further investigation, Lionel was identified as the sole suspect, with all others cleared and designated as witnesses. In the spring of 2022, he was officially charged and remained in custody until the trial concluded. The hearings for the case began in March of the following year, and based on the evidence and witness testimonies, Lionel's guilt was clearly established. At first, the prosecution charged Lionel with intentionally murdering Valeria and aimed for the harshest possible sentence. But Lionel maintained that he would never hurt Valeria because he loved her. However, the bullet that killed her came from his gun. Lionel Alejandro Contas Canales was convicted of manslaughter and received a 12-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 8 years. After the verdict was announced, the Vivano family voiced their disappointment, believing the sentence was too light. Meanwhile, Lionel and his legal team quickly filed several appeals. In February 2024, Valeria's family received a shocking update. when the Supreme Court unexpectedly reduced the punishment for Lionel to just 540 days in prison, starting from the day he was arrested. This meant he effectively walked out of the courtroom a free man. In response, the Larry of Ivano's family intends to sue the Chilean government, alleging that the judges acted corruptly. In a statement, the Liria's mother expressed her heartbreak, stating that the original 12-year sentence had felt too lenient, but the new decision felt like a mockery. She mentioned that it was as if she had lost her daughter all over again and that she no longer had faith in justice. Furthermore, she emphasized that their family was determined to hold the negligent Chilean government for what had happened. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Anna Walsh. Anna Walsh was born on April 18, 1983, in Belgrade, Serbia. She grew up in a cultured family alongside her younger sister. Anna attended the 5th Belgrade Gymnasium, where she distinguished herself as an outstanding student. She then pursued higher education at Belgrade Research University, the oldest and largest university in Serbia, focusing on foreign languages. She earned a master's degree in French language and literature. At 22, Anna graduated and decided to explore new opportunities in the United States, with her family's full support. In 2005, she began her American journey and settled in the U.S. with the goal of advancing her education in hospitality management. She took on administrative positions at renowned hotels, including the Inn at Little Washington in Virginia, which is part of the prestigious Relais and Chateaux collection. Anna's friendly nature, approachability, and strong sense of responsibility helped her quickly rise in her career, earning the respect of her colleagues and managers. Anna was multilingual and skilled at resolving conflicts, which helped her easily connect with others. She was well liked by her colleagues and had a group of friends. Anna took every opportunity to shine in her career. She became a U.S. citizen while keeping her Serbian nationality, earned a high income, and invested in her own home and car. Her travels expanded her perspective, and she was promoted to senior manager. Known for her intelligence, beauty, slender figure, and bright smile, Anna attracted many admirers during her time at the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox, Massachusetts. There, she fell in love with Marcus O'Neill, the hotel's head chef, and they got married in 2009, with Anna adopting his last name. After got married with Marcus, Anna's life takes a turn when she meets Brian Walsh. Brian Walsh, born in July 1975 in Boston, Massachusetts, comes from a prominent and wealthy family. In his younger days, he would often borrow money from friends without paying them back. While in college, he would treat friends to meals at expensive restaurants, but would use various tricks to make sure they ended up paying for him. For years, Brian was estranged from his father, Dr. Thomas Walsh, and this distance continued until Thomas passed away in 2018. Their troubled relationship began when Brian deceitfully withdrew nearly $1 million from his father's personal account and vanished with the money. The father did not report his son to the police and even tried to convince him to return the stolen money. When Brian refused, Thomas cut off all communication with him. At the time of this serious theft, Brian's parents had been divorced for a long time, and his father had started a new family. Thomas decided to completely remove his eldest son from his life and his will. However, after Thomas passed away, Brian quickly asserted his claim and filed a lawsuit, alleging that the will was forged by Thomas' widow and younger children to deny him his rightful inheritance. Unfortunately, he could not provide any evidence to support his claims and did not receive any part of the estate. Many people who knew Brian described him as greedy, malicious, and very cruel. He often resorted to violence and struggled to control his emotions. He would get what he wanted using force, and when he was angry, he became a threat to others. Reports indicate that in the late 2000s, Brian received treatment at a psychiatric clinic to manage his anger, during which he was officially diagnosed with sociopathy. In 2014, a unique love story began when Anna met Brian, a hotel guest. At the time, Anna was married to Marcus O'Neill, who also worked at the hotel. Despite Anna's marriage, Brian was immediately attracted to her and began to pursue her with increasing intensity. Used to getting what he wanted and unwilling to accept rejection, he relentlessly sought Anna's attention. He eventually obtained her phone number and home address, where she lived with her husband, creating a troubling situation for all involved. In 2015, the O'Neill family had to involve the police due to Brian's relentless harassment, which occurred around the clock. He repeatedly pursued Anna, calling her at work, texting her personal phone, and insisting that she divorce her husband to be with him. The situation intensified when Brian threatened to harm Anna and her husband if she did not leave with him. The details that followed are unclear, particularly why Anna ultimately changed her mind. However, a year after, she surprisingly divorced her husband. A few months later, Brian became her second husband. The newlyweds moved into a luxurious home in Casson, Massachusetts, which is about 20 miles southeast of Boston, in a well-off neighborhood. They had 3 sons in quick succession, with the boys being born a couple of years apart. Anna chose not to take maternity leave and successfully balanced her job with being a mother, continuing to advance in her career. She became the regional general manager at Tishman Speyer, a real estate company, where she earned a high salary and became the primary breadwinner for the family. Since her job often required travel to Washington, D.C., she bought another home there in her name, where she stayed during business trips. During these trips, she relied on visiting nannies to help care for her children. What was Brian doing while his wife was busy expanding their family and advancing her career? Brian was unemployed. The $1 million he had once received from his father was running out, and everything his wife earned was carefully registered in her name. Brian was looking for easy ways to make money. Before marrying Anna, he had spent some time in South Korea, where he became friends with a wealthy people whose family owned an impressive art collection. After returning to the United States, Brian kept in touch with this friend, who unexpectedly asked for his help in selling several paintings by the famous artist Andy Warhol. Brian eagerly agreed but chose not only to sell the artworks for a commission, he wanted to profit from the transaction. He had a collection of abstract paintings by a renowned artist, titled Shadow. Brian assessed each painting and gathered the required documentation, including authenticity certificates. He then decided to create copies of both the paintings and the documentation. To do this, he contacted artists who could produce precise replicas of the paintings. Brian convinced the artists that he needed these copies as backups, since each original painting was valued at approximately $250,000. For several years, Brian successfully created and sold fake paintings as if they were originals to collectors from different countries. His scheme came to an end when one of his buyers, an art expert who specializes in Andy Warhol, quickly recognized forgery and took legal action against him. The FBI then launched an investigation, and in April 2021, he pleaded guilty to selling counterfeit art. As part of a deal negotiated by his lawyer, he was placed under house arrest instead of serving time in prison, on the condition that he return the money earned from the sale of the fake paintings to the buyers. Although Brian's movements were heavily restricted, he could leave his house twice a day to drop off and pick up his children from school. He also had 2.5 hours each morning to visit a limited number of approved places nearby, such as stores, pharmacies, and dry cleaners, to buy essential items. On December 31, 2022, the Walsh family was getting ready to celebrate New Year's Eve at home. Only Anna, Brian, and their 3 young sons were present. Because of their age, the boys went to bed early, leaving Anna and Brian at the dinner table. That day, Anna shared her last social media post, where she sent New Year's greetings and mentioned that the past year had been tough, but she and Brian were still together. Anna was supposed to fly to Washington, D.C. for work on January 3rd. However, when she didn't show up for work on January 4th and missed an important deal, her boss, Tishman Speyer, reported her missing to the police. Her phone had also been unreachable for several days. Brian also reported her missing, expressing concern that he had not been able to contact her for several days. According to Brian, he last saw Anna on January 1st. He claimed that she had woken him up early in the morning, saying there were some issues at work and that her boss had asked her to come in earlier than planned. He then believed that his wife had gone to the airport with only a few belongings. However, inconsistencies in the case soon emerged. First, Anna had not purchased, changed, or booked a flight on January 1st, nor had she canceled a flight scheduled for January 3rd. Second, she had not shown up at the airport on either January 1st or January 3rd. Third, how had she left the house? Her personal car was still in the garage, and she had not called a taxi. Brian suggested that she may have hitchhiked, but this theory was not convincing. Brian's statements and behavior raised many questions. His accounts were inconsistent, and he did not seem particularly interested in what was going on. Unable to contact Anna for more than 3 days, he only reported her missing on the 4th day, and only after her workplace called. Brian was considered the prime suspect from the start. However, law enforcement did not have sufficient grounds to arrest him or obtain a search warrant for his family home. They conducted only a cursory search with his permission, but nothing came of it. Brian maintained that he had lived a normal life during those 3 days, visiting shops regularly and doing housework. However, verifying his claims proved difficult. Each time he left the house, he forgot his phone, which he said was often taken away by his older children to play games without permission. On January 5th, police issued a public appeal on television, showing a photo of Anna and asking anyone with information about her whereabouts or fate to contact law enforcement immediately. However, no witnesses came forward. Anna was known to have called her mother and sister one last time on December 31st, making her husband the last person known to have seen her. Surveillance footage from the neighborhood provided no clues. Anna was not captured on any cameras on the morning of January 1st, as if she had never left the house. Her husband, on the other hand, was recorded leaving and returning multiple times, but his destination could not be determined. His claims of a trip to the grocery store were dismissed. His car was not seen in any footage of the route, nor was it spotted in the store. It wasn't until January 8 that Brian was arrested for perjury and taken to the police station for questioning while his home was finally searched. It was discovered that on January 1st, he had visited a hardware store in another area, not on the list of approved places he could visit while under house arrest. There, he spent nearly $500 on a large amount of cleaning supplies, plastic sheeting, duct tape, a mop with a bucket, and utility rags. He paid in cash, perhaps hoping his visit would go unnoticed. The initial search of the family home turned up nothing unusual or suspicious. Everything was in its place, and there were no signs of a struggle or traces of blood. However, when law enforcement descended into the basement, there was no doubt. It was the scene of a gruesome crime. Blood was everywhere, and hidden among the old furniture was a bloody knife and saw wrapped in towels. Brian had previously admitted that on January 3rd, he had visited his mother's house on the other side of town. He claimed that he had violated the terms of his house arrest because his mother needed help with housework due to her poor health. But after the grisly discoveries in the basement, police suspected that along the way, the man may have disposed of evidence or some of his deceased wife's body parts. All the trash cans in the area where he and his wife lived, as well as along the route to his mother's house, were checked. These searches were fruitful, and in one of them, a kitchen axe with traces of dried blood and several bloody towels similar to those found in basement were discovered. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood on the towels, knives, axes, and saws in the basement was that of the missing Anna, clearing any remaining doubts about her death. The search history on a laptop and a tablet seized from his home shows disturbing intentions. In the weeks leading up to his wife's disappearance, Brian searched the internet for information about the best states for divorce based on property division. He also looked into whether he could claim ownership of a second home in Washington, D.C. that belonged solely to Anna. This raises suspicions about his motives. At around 4 a.m. on January 1st, the first search made on the tablet was, "How long does it take for a body to start decomposing?" This search was followed by nearly 20 additional queries related to body disposal, such as how to clean up blood, how to dismember a body, whether a body could be identified without teeth, how long DNA can last, and if someone could be charged with a crime if the body was never discovered. All of these searches were conducted on the tablet belonging to his young child, who is the offspring of the woman he brutally harmed. By January 3rd, Brian was already looking up how and when someone can inherit property from a missing person. He seemed confident he could avoid punishment and was preparing to claim the inheritance. On January 18th, he was formally charged with his wife's murder, even though her body had not been found. Prosecutors believe that on the night of January 1st, Brian either deliberately or accidentally killed his wife. They suspect he then dismembered her body in their basement and placed the parts in plastic bags, disposing of them in trash bins around the city over the next few days. The area surrounding the Brian residence and within a few kilometers was carefully searched for evidence. Nearby wastelands, forests, and bodies of water were also investigated, but no findings were made. The defendant pleaded not guilty and did not reveal what he did with the body. Furthermore, it was disclosed that Anna had been feeling unhappy recently and had contemplated divorcing her husband. She expressed this concern multiple times during phone calls with her mother and sister. The day before her disappearance, she called her mother, asking her to fly from Serbia for a few days. However, her mother did not take her daughter seriously and decided to postpone the visit. Brian Walsh's trial is currently ongoing, and he is being held at the Norfolk Correctional Facility, waiting for his next court date. Anna's mother has been monitoring the investigation from Serbia, as she has not traveled to the United States. The Serbian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has reached out to the consulate in New York, which is coordinating with the Norfolk District Attorney's Office to ensure that Anna's mother receives timely updates about the investigation in court hearings. The 3 sons of the Walsh family are currently in state custody. Brian's family members do not want to care for them, mainly due to Anna's mother's age and health issues. Additionally, Anna's sister, who lives in Canada, has also refused to take in her nephews. The only person willing to take the boys is Anna's close friend, Pamela Bond, who prefers to care for them herself rather than see them separated and placed in different foster homes. As the investigation progresses and Brian Walsh's trial continues, it highlights the need to be aware of our relationships and the serious harm that can result from betrayal and deceit. While we do not yet know the final outcome for Brian Walsh, including whether he will face punishment or if Anna's body will ever be discovered, we will always remember Anna as a kind and loving person.